Hey everyone, Dan McKenzie here with the McKenzie Law Firm. We are a law firm in Denver, Colorado, specializing in estate planning, estate administration, and small business counsel. And in this video, I wanted to discuss in the probate process, the personal representative is required to do a couple things. One is to create an inventory, and the other is to create an accounting. And those might sound like similar things. You might wonder what is the difference between those two. It's really important to understand what that obligation is and why you need to do it. So the inventory is the list of items that the decedent had that are going through the probate process and their value at the time of the person's death. And so some time might pass actually between the person's death and when you create this document, depending on when the probate process started. In Colorado, there are certain deadlines for how quickly you need to get this inventory assembled. It's about 3 months after the probate process starts and you've been appointed as the personal representative. So there is a time limit out there, but when that probate process started, sometimes it can be years actually. So in those situations, putting together the inventory can be very challenging. And even when you have started the probate process pretty quickly and have gotten on this inventory, sometimes there are some tricky things about it. So you know, if there's stocks in a portfolio that is going to go through a probate process, you need to look back and make sure you're valuing those stocks at the time of the person's death, not when you're doing it, not when you're putting together the inventory, because that obviously can change quite dramatically, quite quickly. Real estate, probably the value is a little bit more stable, but then the question is, how do I do this valuation, right? I mean, we don't really know. There's not really a liquid market for real estate. You got to put it on the market and see what it sells for, and that's how you know what it's worth. So, you know, usually you're making good faith estimates on that. And then, of course, there's personal property. In most cases, we don't really break that out. It's usually one line item, so we're not trying to go through and inventory the whole house necessarily. But if there are unique items in there, or especially valuable items, you got to be careful about that. Again, if there's like artwork or something that would need to be appraised, you might have to do that. So getting the inventory correctly assembled and making sure that you understand that it is date of death, not when you're putting together the inventory, is kind of the key starting point. And then as you're doing the estate administration, so as you're collecting insurance or gathering accounts or selling assets or preparing a house for sale or selling the house, you know, there's all kinds of stuff where you might be paying final expenses, medical bills. So throughout that whole process, there is money going into the estate and then money going back out of the estate, like a little business. The accounting is supposed to show all the beneficiaries and possibly the creditors too, what happened, you know, after the inventory was created, and between that and when the estate actually got dispersed, what were all the transactions that led to the final amount of the estate. And they have to be big, small, everything, right? Every time you're spending estate money or gathering money that really properly belongs to the estate, that's got to go on the accounting. And so the word accounting is kind of intimidating, you know. I mean, obviously that is a very high-level profession, and doing accounting is no easy feat in most cases. In the probate process, it is a pretty straightforward document. It's just really a chronological list of all the transactions that you did. So we're not really breaking things out and trying to decide, you know, which account each item goes into. There's really just one list. So in that sense, it's a little bit more manageable. But the key thing to understand is that at the end of the process, you know, again, beneficiaries, creditors have a right to see both the inventory and the accounting so that they can understand where things started and how they got to where they ended. And if they're not happy with it, if they don't think it really makes any sense, they have a right to ask to see supporting documentation. And so that means receipts, right? So you might have, you know, after your parent died, you know, hired somebody to come over and fix something, or hired somebody to come over and help you clean out the house or something like that. And then it might be a long time before we really close the estate, right? We might have to wait before we have the final tax returns figured out and before we have all the medical bills sorted and all that kind of stuff. And so probate processes, you know, typically I will say probably 15 months, give or take 3, but they can be shorter than that, they can be longer than that. And so if you've got an accounting and you've got a creditor who's not getting fully paid, and they're looking at the accounting and saying, hey, you know, you spent $5,000 at Home Depot, last year. That seems like a lot, or how do we know you're not mixing in your own stuff in that and charging the estate for it? We want to see that receipt. And you better be able to produce it, frankly. So with the accounting, not really intellectually hard, but being able to go back and say, okay, I can produce this receipt, and I can hold on to a receipt for a long time and put my hands on it pretty quickly, fast. And so that is kind of the big challenge there for personal representatives. And again, it's got to be right. So it's got to add up. And so that is a challenge there. Being organized, being diligent, keeping it going as you're doing stuff is a heck of a lot easier. We see a lot of situations where people don't do the accounting until the end, right? So it's like, oh, I got to put together this thing. And now we're going back 13, 14, 15 months trying to reconstruct transactions and stuff like that. And that is now a challenging task. So super important. You got to get the inventory right, got to get the accounting right. If you're a personal representative, you really got to be on these things and make sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's and really keeping track of your records. And so hope that helps. If we can be helpful to you, especially for estates being administered in Colorado, we are in the Denver area. Again, we're the McKenzie Law Firm, 303-578-2745, and appreciate you watching this video, and I hope this helped.